Good morning, members of my beloved Unitarian Universalist congregation of Phoenix, along with family and friends from all over the country. I am Sam Kirkland, father of Daryl and Shannon, grandfather of Dion and Devin, and the proud son of Sam Kirkland. About 3 months ago, I was about to fly to Syracuse, New York to honor a father's promise to my oldest daughter, Daryl. I volunteered to help her out with Dion while Daryl and Red got ready for Devin's birth. I was as anxious as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs at the prospect of flying with the coronavirus on the uptick. Add to that flying into New York, one of COVID-19's hotspots. Michelle and I had a courageous conversation and bore our souls and concerns, and I pledged to take as many precautions as I could. I collected PPE and well wishes from friends and neighbors, while some family members actively questioned my sanity. Through my 30 plus years of being a father, I have always tried to honor my word to my daughters, and as anxious as I was determined that COVID-19 wasn't going to be the reason for a repeat of that doggone daddy-daughter dance that I missed. Long story short, Devin Morgan Lovell was welcomed into this world with all its joy and pain, sunshine and rain on March 30th. I don't think of myself as a particularly brave person. However, through my experiences and lessons learned from fatherhood, I'm a better person for the impact being a father has had in my life. The best and longest job that I've ever had, aside from being Michelle's husband, happiest of happy birthdays to you, boo. 60 looks so good on you, darling, is being granted stewardship of my daughters and now granddaughters. It has endowed a regular, ordinary man with the courage, confidence, grace, humility, and unconditional love to act selflessly. Although it's not a feeling that I seek out willy-nilly whenever I do have the chance to practice it, it's always worth the stretch. I wish you all a happy Father's Day and encourage you to lean into the stretch. I've asked 4 men on our panel today to speak briefly about their experiences as men, as fathers, even as sons. The questions revolved around how has your life been impacted by fatherhood, including COVID-19, racial protests, police brutality, and just the general times that we're living through. Thank you for welcoming them to our service. And the first to speak will be Jess Putnam.
Good morning. My name is Jess Putnam. Thank you, Sam, for inviting me to be a part of the 2020 Father's Day service at UUCP. I am the father of my 2 beautiful daughters, Nabi, who is 8, and Jera, 6. I co-parent them along with their other parent half of the week as a single parent. Along with many parents, my daughter's spring break this year evolved into an odd barrage of homeschooling lessons and Zoom logins. And this was a surprising addition to also working endlessly to make all the ends meet more snugly for my family. I had a lot of work to do quickly. A practice of deep breathing and allowing life to take its course has really helped. Sometimes as a single parent, I can feel a waterfall of emotions as I navigate new parenting situations. Yet always, I get motivated and get my daughters and I into some calm water. Grounding yourself and breathing deep is the advice that I would pass along to other fathers and parents. And having awesome UU friends is truly magical. I've had the privilege of assessing what my children learn and shifting the possibilities of what their education looks like. We've had more time to go foraging outside and learn about the world around us. We've been able to hear from the news how this virus has impacted people of color more due to ongoing systemic injustices. As a white father, I have to be honest and I have to open up and tell them I am challenging the racist adults that I encounter and promise I'm doing as much as I can to confront and challenge the racism that I see in those around me. One of the most difficult aspects of the virus has been consistently correcting adults that I work with outside of the UUC community on the correct name of the virus instead of the Asian slur that they unfortunately have assigned to it. Thanks, Trump, for that. Among other things, this has been really frustrating me a lot as a parent of two Korean children. However, I know it is a smaller fraction of difficulties compared to what others are going through. And that is why I have also used this extra time to read more and practice creative responses for the All Lives Matter folks that are out there. And it is super, super rad to watch the news and to have discussions about abolition and alternatives to police with my daughters. My family immensely misses being a part of the radically inclusive kid community at UUCP. As an individual working with the children's ministry, I have really missed all of the students' silly outlooks on life and their unique perspectives. We're at least super fortunate to have all of these Zoom meetings that we get to be a part of. A larger idea that has come out of this pandemic for me as a parent is the idea around just how important it is to value and empower all of the children in my life, which leads to the words I want to leave you with. These come from a PBS report called The Critical Role White Parents Play in Shaping Racism and Eradicating It. The most important thing that white parents can do is embrace the idea that all children are worthy of their consideration and that we should care about our community. We should think about the collective good. We should focus on how we can help everyone rather than just focusing on our own children. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is William D. Lester Jr. I'm hailing in from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually delighted to be here as a panelist today. I feel being present really brings me full circle as my UU identity actually began at UUCP. I'm truly grateful for the UUCP's Coming of Age program. Specifically, want to give a shout out to Katie. She was pivotal in the contribution to my fatherhood for my son. And I do want to state that I am, currently UUA staff, and so I'm participating today as an individual, and my words are my own. As the father of my son, David Lester, who's actually born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, he's actually will be 17 in August, and it's really kind of honestly hard to fathom that he's now becoming a young man. And as a single father, most of my life's memories and experiences actually revolve around fatherhood. You know, the delicate balancing act of trying my best to raise a good human, being a life learner, and being a provider as well, which is a constant in my life. That being said, a dad is really the best and most challenging experience, I've had in my life. And honestly, raising a teen is honestly really complicated. I'm doing my best. To be honest, I'm going to be really honest with everyone. I really struggled with what to talk about today. African Americans are taught at a very young age about Black excellence. We know we need to live. We know we live in an unjust society, requiring us to give 150%, which amounts to a lot of pressure at times and mental trauma that often goes undiagnosed. My Black cultural programming tells me to share a positive story, as the others on the panel may have shared or will share, to ensure we're represented in the best light. However, I feel, with these pressing times, we need to stand united with the Black Lives Matter movement. That said, I want to share two personal stories, one that I've actually never shared publicly outside of my family and very close friends. In truth, I do consider the UU community my extended family, so I guess I'm still staying true to my inhibition. My grandfather, Grover Washington Lester, was a great man who I admired dearly. He was a veteran and a business owner. He and his wife, my late grandmother, Orly Lester, were leaders in our Black community in South Los Angeles. Unfortunately, he passed away prematurely due to a medical condition when I was 10 years old. Growing up, I always admired his photo, him posed in front of the American flag, and I always knew that I also wanted to serve. So we'll go ahead and get started with the personal note. Back in 1996, I was 16 years old. I was a star football player at Pius Stan Catholic High School in Downey, California. And I was also taking supplemental courses at King Drew Medical Center, studying to become a doctor because, I had recently passed the ASVAB and was assigned to enlist in the Army as a medical bravo. I was basically, a nerdy athlete, and just bear with me. Yeah, I was basically a nerdy athlete, and I was really living, really my best life. But one evening, I received a late call from my cousin. He was really hungry. I often felt compelled to help him because, I knew that I was growing up privileged compared to most of my community. I picked him up and took him to a local Taco Bell and waited in the car. The next thing I know, the police pulled up aggressively, dragged me out of the car, threw me on the ground, and placed his knee on my face. Mind you, I was 16 years old at the time, and I was arrested. On the way to the police station, I was crying and I was afraid. And my cousin admitted he had a gun in his waistband, but that he paid for the food, and an off-duty officer claimed he tried to rob Taco Bell. In the brief, to be brief, he was 17 at the time, and he was tried as an adult. The robbery charge was dropped because he paid for the food, and the Taco Bell cashier testified on his behalf. Unfortunately, of course, he was charged with possession of a weapon. However, my case was tried as a juvenile court and is a completely different court system. I was encouraged by the public defender to take a plea deal for the charge of accessory to robbery. In the end, my parents, they didn't know what to do. We couldn't afford a lawyer. So we took the plea deal for, accessory to robbery that actually didn't occur, for the illusion of freedom. This meant, I was now considered a criminal by the system, and I could no longer serve in the military or become a doctor. This experience honestly has always stayed with me as a father, and wanting to protect my son from the cycle of state violence against Black lives. In 2017, I was actually teaching my son to drive in our Tempe community, which I'm a homeowner and actually drive a Mercedes. I was filming and the experience to add to my collection of memories as a father. And unfortunately, we were pulled over at gunpoint, with my son in the driver's seat. Quite honestly, I became enraged internally, and the experience of my childhood, experience flashed before my eyes. I was actually really scared for my son's life because a young Hispanic teen had recently been killed by the Tempe Police Department, and not to mention the recent killing of Tamir Rice. I recently regained my composure, mainly for our safety, and asked the officer why he pulled us over, with his gun exposed. The officer stated, a local Karen called the police and stated two Black males were driving around, filming and casing the neighborhood for potential robbery or home invasion. I explained to the officer I was simply teaching my son to drive. The officer quickly, apologized. He told David to keep up the good work. And the next day, I didn't really know what to do, so I thought about it a lot. And so I enrolled my son into Tempe Police Department's Explorer program, so he could learn about law enforcement, and most importantly, so the police department would know who my son is to shield him from police brutality. This is my personal story. Again, I haven't really shared this with anyone publicly, but this type of thing happens, on a daily basis in America. That said, I implore you all to support, the current Black Lives Matter movement in your own way, whether you believe in defunding the police or not. I know as Americans, documented or undocumented, we all agree, protecting our kids, equitably or equally, from state violence via direct legislative action, decrease funding for community policing, social services, and education. And for that, I thank you all for listening to my story and for your time. And I know, our UU community, will help uplift the voices and in the struggle to help build a better future for all of us. Thank you.
I'm Gary Ezel. I am father to Jacob and Leah, and grandfather to Alexander, Benjamin, Drake, and Lucian, and son of Earl. And it is my dad that I'll speak of today. He and my mom raised my sister and I in a suburb of Kansas City. And after they both retired, they hooked up their truck and camper trailer and toured the country for a couple of years before settling down in the southern tip of Texas, a long way from Kansas City, and stayed there for a number of years. They were in a retirement RV community there, made lots of friends, had a good life. Now, my dad had a heart condition, and it was always expected that my mom would outlive him. But that isn't what happened. She died rather suddenly at age 76. And he continued. He stayed there for another 8 years. He grew increasingly isolated, though, as time went on, because his friends there were dying or moving back home for them. And so at age 85, he decided he should do the same. Now, he'd have preferred to die, but that's not so easy. So instead, he decided to move, and my sister lives in Virginia, which he decided was going to be much too cold. So he wanted to come to Phoenix, which was good, because that meant that he and I would get to be physically close for the first time since I left to go off for college. That was a big change. I had helped him find some possible retirement communities while he was down there and I was up here. But on the day he was to fly up and choose which one to live in, he fell and broke his hip as he was walking out to the car. So he went into surgery and then rehab for 5 weeks. And in the meantime, I had to pick for him. And my sister and daughter flew down to Texas and packed everything up for him, FaceTiming him with the iPad so that he could tell them, keep this, don't keep that. So they packed everything up, and after 5 weeks, I flew down there and got him and his stuff, and we drove to Phoenix. And that was the beginning of a long and difficult transition for him, not just to a new space, but also a transition from independence to dependency. See, Mom had always been the more social one, and he never really made new friends, particularly in Phoenix. He just wasn't that interested. And as his physical and mental health declined, he became more and more dependent on his caregivers and quite a bit on me. He was quite aware of these changes, and he felt his diminishment. It was a hard 5 years for him. One day, we were talking about something or other that I thought we needed to do, some change we needed to make. And he looked at me and said, rather quietly, "Whatever you say, son, you're the father now." Now that was hard. That was hard. You're the father now. There was a lot of emotion embedded in that. Sadness, resignation, love, gratitude, trust. He died one night in a hospice home. I wasn't there. I am father, grandfather, and son. To everything, there is a season.
I'm the proud father of JoJo Watson. When I was growing up in New York City in the 1990s, I had no fear of the New York City Police Department. Of course, there was lots of corruption and black people were definitely targets. Yet still, I had no fears. My father, Eugene Watson, was a Vietnam veteran who made a career for himself as captain with the New York City Department of Corrections. So when I was about 16 years of age, he handed me a laminated card that contained his name and badge number with the telephone number at the bottom. He told me that if I ever found myself in a situation with the police, that I should present this card immediately and if necessary, call the number at the bottom for more assistance. This wasn't a get out of jail free card by any means. However, it contained a few privileges along the lines of ensuring proper treatment. For instance, if I was arrested or detained by the police, there was a very small chance that I would be subjected to any kind of abuse. Thankfully, I never had to use that card, but it felt pretty damn good to have that in my back pocket. So like I said, I had no fears of the New York City police. On March 16, 2015, my father passed away after his battle with colon cancer. So naturally, all those protection privileges that he extended to me disappeared with his passing. Here in Arizona, I have no connections to law enforcement that contain special privileges, and I certainly don't have any of those privileges to extend to my child. It takes a lot of adjustment having to live with current conditions regarding police brutality and the feeling of discomfort when law enforcement is present. For the past several years, my wife Sunshine and I began having these discussions with my soon-to-be 11-year-old child about the importance of being extremely cooperative with situations involving law enforcement to avoid being seriously hurt or even killed. Recently, we had a discussion about the protests and the marches happening around the world to remind him just how important the situation is. So as a black father, I will continue to teach them about the importance of being cooperative with law enforcement, but I refuse to teach them to live in fear. Even though I don't have any police protection privileges for myself or my child, I refuse to live in fear myself. Thank you.